If I thought 30 years ago when I started off on this journey, could I actually be drafting contracts and changing laws and regulations to allow human spaceflight, or even just launch of rockets from the UK soil? It's phenomenal. My name is Joanne Wheeler, and I suppose I'm a space lawyer. It's quite a wide collection of activities, anything from boring big commercial contracts for launching or building satellites, right through to really exciting things like drafting the regulations for life on Mars. I come from Edinburgh, Scotland. When I was 9 years old, I had a wonderful teacher called Mr. Haig, and he said, "Do you know what? I usually prescribe a report for all of you to do and a project, but this summer, I want you to choose a project that you're most passionate about." And my father was a printer and brought home lots of books, and he was bringing home books on astronomy. So I decided to do a little report on astronomy. I got an empty book and populated it with bits of pictures and sketches and drawings, and I still have the book, and that was my inspiration at the age of 9, space, which was bigger than me, bigger than anything else. And I went to university and studied space law, believe it or not, and the rest is history. Neither of my parents had gone to university. So I do not come from a privileged background. I come from a very humble background. And to be very open, my father was even reticent about me going to university because I was female, a girl, and he thought it would be very hard for me. Going into space, actually he encouraged that because he saw that there was a future. But no, I come from a very humble background. I went to a state primary school. I was lucky enough to go to a private school for secondary. I went through high school really not quite knowing what I wanted to do, whether it was architect or art, believe it or not, or some form of business aspects, or I really didn't know. I did a wide variety of subjects from some history, geography, but when I chose, I did higher and then A-levels. So I did a biology, which I loved, and it's amazing how biology has been actually quite useful in space in regard to how humans deal with space. English, economics. Went to university and did a wide variety of subjects again. I was sitting down with my parents looking at choices, and there was a professor, and I went into his room, Professor Lyle, and I went into his room and it was paper up to the walls. And I said, "Quite interested in space law, can you tell me about it?" And he came around from his desk, went into one of these huge piles that defied gravity, pulled a piece of paper out halfway down and said, "Look at this. This will be inspiration about everything you can do for space moving forward." And thank goodness I did space law and environmental law because that's so key. I also did something a bit nuts, legal anthropology. That has been hugely valuable. Because if you think about different cultures worldwide and their use of space, and then think about the amount of satellites that are going up there, if we're thinking about 40, 50, 60,000, if they're using the moon and their stars as part of their culture, how does that develop with the amount of stuff that we're putting up there? So we need to balance what is going up there with also the cultural respect to people on Earth. So that legal anthropology for me was very, very important. So what I'm trying to say is diverse subjects are very useful. So job history, I was lucky enough to get a traineeship as a lawyer. And on my first day I said, "I'm really interested in space law," and they laughed. They really did laugh. For the next 15 years, I'll be very honest with you, most people laughed at me saying, "You want to do space law?" Yes. And I actually genuinely think it's going to be incredibly important for communications, for Earth observation, etc. I got a job after about 6 years with European Space Agency. But I should say that before I went into working life, I did a course, the first ever course that is still available for any students who want to do it, with the European Centre of Space Law. This was at the University of Messina in Italy, and I loved it for 2 weeks, meeting the experts around the world that were doing amazing things. I then tutored for the European Space Agency for 3 years after that, and that sowed the seeds. And anything that came up that was international, communications related, space related, I jumped at it. Got a job at European Space Agency, was there for 5 years. I was the main lawyer for the International Space Station and human spaceflight, which was fantastic, and the commercialization of these aspects. That was an eye-opener, it was fantastic. And then ever since then, I've stayed very, very closely in space. My job is quite diverse, a big range of aspects, but in any typical day, so working as a team in regard to a launch contract, particularly a contract for a launch from the UK, or building satellites, or building a constellation of 600 plus satellites. So that's contracts. But then we might be needing to look at the regulatory aspects of how do we draft the space law for a country from scratch, and then working with psychologists, neurosurgeons, etc. So we don't just work with other lawyers, we work with industry in a wide variety of aspects, but also different disciplines, including medics, for example. So a lot of the things I used to do when I was a bit younger, like mountaineering, etc., always looking up at the dark night skies, it's harder to do because I have 3 kids. And 14, 12 and 10 and the girls. We have the Anything Club, or we call it the Anything Club, where I would encourage my girls to do anything they want. There's one caveat: they need to work. They need to focus. And the middle one, in particular, wants us to remove all plastic at home. So we're setting up an Earth and Space Sustainability Initiative at Space Park Leicester, in Leicester. And once I told her, she burst into tears when I told her this. And I look her in the eyes every night and said, we're still setting up this Earth and Space Sustainability Institute to look at space debris and mitigate it for life on Earth, and how space can help us for Earth. And you are my inspiration. Because as I said, what faces me on a day-to-day basis is things that have never been done before. Therefore, we need people from different backgrounds, different disciplines, different thinking, different experiences, and that's what makes it work. Influencing and advocacy is a huge part of what we do, whether it's advocating for industry, different changes in policy. We've managed to change policy 4 times now and change regulation. But other qualities, honestly, enthusiasm goes a huge way. And the ability to think laterally. There is no one easy solution necessarily, so you have to think laterally for different solutions. So what I would sometimes say to people is what we do is international problem solving. So an attitude to adopt to look at space law. Pick up newspapers, look on the news, look on what industry is happening, look at what Elon Musk is doing, but look at also what smaller companies are doing. So the more general knowledge you have would really, really, really help. So follow your interests. For such a diverse sector where you can actually be yourself and use all of the attributes that you have, because you can find a home in space, you can make space for you, to use a bad pun. The law firm that we set up just 5 years ago is the only law firm that is dedicated to space in Europe. And we have more work than we could possibly manage. So honestly, if anyone is listening, there is a job career waiting for you in space law, policy, regulation with enthusiasm. It's actually a market that you go into where your expertise is seriously sought after. Can't say that with every job.